In the history of warfare, some moments defy belief. They are acts of such audacious brilliance and sheer willpower that they seem to belong to myth rather than reality. This is the story of one such moment. It's the story of a man who decided to do the impossible, to lead an army where no army was meant to go. In the year 18 BC, the fate of the ancient world balanced on a knife's edge, caught between the rising power of Rome and the mighty naval empire of Carthage. At the heart of this conflict was a general named Hannibal Barca. Raised to despise Rome, he conceived a plan so daring it was considered madness. He would not attack Rome from the sea, as expected. Instead, he would march his army, including dozens of war elephants, over the most formidable natural barrier in Europe, the Alps. The plan was born from a lifetime of conflict. Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca, had fought Rome in the First Punic War and lost. On his deathbed, he made his young son swear an oath of eternal enmity against the Roman Republic. Hannibal took this oath to heart. When the Second Punic War began, he was ready. His strategy was to bring the war directly to the Italian heartland, to shatter Roman alliances and force a surrender on their own soil. But to do that, he first had to get there. From his base in Spain, he gathered a formidable force, tens of thousands of infantry and cavalry, composed of experienced Libyan, Iberian, and Gallic mercenaries, and, most famously, his war elephants living, breathing siege engines intended to terrify the Roman legions. His journey began not at the foot of the mountains, but hundreds of miles away. He marched his massive army from Spain across the Pyrenees Mountains and through the hostile territories of southern Gaul, modern-day France. Hannibal's march north was not a simple journey. It was a campaign in itself. He had to navigate a complex web of alliances and rivalries among the Gallic tribes. Some he won over with diplomacy and promises of gold. Others he had to fight, proving his army's strength in swift, brutal battles. Every step of the way, Roman intelligence was watching. The Roman general Scipio tried to intercept him at the Rhone River, but Hannibal, ever the master of deception, outmaneuvered him. He crossed the mighty river using makeshift rafts and pressed on, his eyes fixed on the distant, jagged peaks that loomed on the horizon. His men, many from the warm climates of Africa and Spain, looked at the colossal, snow-capped mountains with a sense of dread. They had never seen anything like them. The Alps were not just a physical obstacle, they were a psychological one, a barrier that whispered of death and the end of the world. But Hannibal's will was absolute. He pointed towards the peaks and told his men that beyond them lay victory, riches, and the fields of Italy. As the Carthaginian army entered the foothills of the Alps, the true nature of their challenge became terrifyingly clear. The air grew thin and cold. The wide plains of Gaul gave way to narrow, treacherous paths carved into the sides of cliffs. The autumn weather, already turning, unleashed its fury upon them. Sudden snowstorms blinded the soldiers, and icy winds cut through their thin tunics. The local mountain tribes, fierce and protective of their territory, saw the invading army as a source of plunder. They launched guerrilla-style ambushes, rolling massive boulders down from the heights to crush the long, vulnerable column of men and animals. The path itself was an enemy. In many places, it was barely wide enough for a single man, with a sheer drop of thousands of feet on one side. Pack animals, laden with vital supplies, lost their footing and plunged into the abyss, their screams echoing in the mountain passes. The march slowed to a crawl, each step a battle against fear, exhaustion, and the unforgiving environment. The ordeal in the mountains was a descent into a frozen hell. Every day brought new horrors. Avalanches would sweep away entire sections of the path, along with the men and animals on it. Food was scarce, and the freezing temperatures led to frostbite and hypothermia. Soldiers, weakened by hunger and cold, would simply lie down in the snow and never get up again. The elephants, symbols of Hannibal's power, suffered terribly. The narrow, icy paths were not made for such massive creatures. They slipped and struggled, their terrified trumpeting a constant, haunting sound in the desolate landscape. Hannibal moved up and down the line, a constant presence of iron resolve. He shared the hardships with his men, sleeping in the open and eating the same meager rations. But even his leadership couldn't prevent the catastrophic losses. Men died by the thousands, not just from enemy attacks, but from falls, starvation, and the cold. The army that had so proudly marched out of Spain was being systematically broken by the mountains. After 9 grueling days of climbing, what was left of the Carthaginian army reached the summit. There was no celebration, only a stunned, exhausted silence. The view was both breathtaking and heartbreaking. Below them, stretching out as far as the eye could see, lay the green plains of Italy. They had made it. They had crossed the impossible barrier. Hannibal gathered his surviving officers and men, many of whom were weeping with a mixture of relief and despair. He pointed towards the valley. "My friends," he declared, "you are now scaling the walls not just of Italy, but of Rome itself." He reminded them of their goal, of the glory that awaited them. But the cost had been staggering. Of the army that had left Spain, nearly half was gone, lost to the mountains. The surviving men were gaunt, frostbitten specters, more a collection of survivors than a fighting force. The war elephants had been decimated, only a few remained. Their ordeal was not over. The descent, they would soon learn, was in many ways more dangerous than the climb. The way down was steeper and icier than the ascent. A fresh layer of snow covered the ice beneath, creating a deadly, slippery trap. Men and animals slid uncontrollably, often crashing into those below them or falling into deep crevices. At one point, a landslide had completely wiped out a section of the path for over 1,000 feet. The army was stranded. Panic began to set in, but Hannibal refused to yield. He ordered his engineers to rebuild the road. For days, his men, already pushed to their limits, worked to carve a new path into the side of the cliff. In a legendary feat of engineering, they heated the massive rocks with fire and then doused them with sour wine. causing them to crack and break apart. Slowly, painstakingly, they built a new road wide enough for the remaining elephants to pass. It was an incredible testament to their endurance and Hannibal's unshakable determination. Finally, after 3 more days of brutal labor and ascent, the army left the snow line behind and stumbled into the warmer, gentler foothills of northern Italy. The arrival of Hannibal's army in Italy sent a shockwave of disbelief and terror through the Roman Republic. No one had believed it was possible. They had expected to fight Hannibal in Spain or perhaps southern Gaul, not on their own doorstep. The Romans had been caught completely off guard. Hannibal's force was battered and severely depleted, but it was also transformed. The men who survived the crossing of the Alps were no longer mere mercenaries. They were a brotherhood forged in extreme adversity. They were hardened, disciplined, and fanatically loyal to the commander who had led them through the impossible. This small elite force, now reinforced with the light Gallic tribes who flocked to his banner, would go on to inflict a series of devastating defeats on the much larger Roman armies. At the battles of Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, Hannibal had brought the war to Rome's heartland just as he had sworn he would. The crossing of the Alps stands as one of the greatest military feats in all of history. It was a masterclass in logistics, engineering, and, above all, leadership. Hannibal did not conquer Rome, and Carthage would ultimately lose the war. But for over a decade, he terrorized Italy, defeating every army sent against him and bringing the Republic to the brink of collapse. His daring march changed the course of the war and redefined the limits of what was considered possible in military strategy. The story of Hannibal is not just a tale of ancient battles. It is a timeless lesson in perseverance, audacity, and the power of a single individual's will to shape the course of history. The mountains remain silent witnesses to the ghost of an army that once dared to cross them, led by a man who would be remembered forever.